Now that you have studied and can recognize those behaviors that are present in a learning organization with a healthy, strong, collaborative culture, you now will be applying that knowledge in some case studies. So based on the case studies, you're going to analyze two that are going to be given to you in the Google Doc after this video. We're going to give you an example here. We want to look at the cultural gap that is exhibited for each of the case studies. You're going to be looking at the structural shifts that you need to implement in order to address the gap. And you also want to look at what is the leader's role in supporting that structural shift. Start with scenario number one. Remember, you're looking for what is the cultural gap, what are some shifts that need to be made, and what is the leader's role in motivating the team to push for that change. For this scenario, if it's better for you as a learner to pause the video and read it, please feel free to do that. I'm also, for those of us who are more audio, who learn better by hearing, I will be reading the prompt as well. However, please feel free to move ahead in the video to the prompt or the check for understanding, or pause and read by yourself so that you can digest and take notes on the scenario. Please know that this is flexible and you can use a learning modality that best fits your needs. Scenario one. You are observing a faculty meeting being led by an administrator regarding substantial changes to the master schedule for the upcoming year. When the administrator finishes his presentation, he asks for feedback. After a period of silence and no comments or questions from the faculty, the meeting ends, and you overhear a few teachers chatting in hushed tones about issues they see with the new schedule. One teacher in particular says, "I agree, but I'm not going to be the one to tell him that." You see the teachers shrug and nod in agreement, then go back to their respective classrooms. What is the most prominent cultural gap in this scenario? Pause, go back again if you want to reread it. There are many gaps here, potentially, but we want to hear about which one, based on your readings, is the most prominent one. Collegiality could have been something you identify. Clearly, the faculty does not feel open to sharing issues with the schedule, and perhaps there's not sufficient respect among teachers and the school leader. Lack of trust and psychological safety, which is the most prominent cultural gap that we see here. There's likely a history. There seems to be a previous history that is known as to why, that is not known as to why the teachers won't go to the leader even after the meeting. And clearly, psychological safety is something that needs to be addressed here. Now let's move into, well, given that there is a lack of psychological safety, what are some of the culture shifts that need to happen? So you're going from a culture shift where the leadership, in terms of leadership, right? The leadership role needs to shift here from a traditional structure where our administrators are seen in leadership position, teachers viewed as implementers or followers, to creating a professional learning community. Administrators are viewed as leaders of leaders. Teachers are viewed as transformational leaders. What does this mean is that the leader needs to create a safe environment. This is where the values being a reflection of the vision, behavior of leaders should be marked by respect, but collaboration. Now let's look at what especially when the shift here needs to be clearly on a big shift on the leader to create that psychological safety, then what is the role more explicitly in making this happen? The leadership team must operate with guidance and respect for those on the team to cultivate a disposition of optimism, honesty, and consideration. You can see how that's linked to the reading. We want to identify teachers as transformational leaders and support them in leadership roles by creating leadership teams that will ensure that the views and concerns of all members of the school faculty are represented. I also want to highlight that it's really important when you're in meetings and you ask for feedback, for you to find different ways to capture that feedback if that psychological safety has not been created. Don't just ask, are there any feedback, but ask for specific feedback. Give time for folks to talk in the meeting about the feedback instead of just saying, is there any feedback? It's very similar to when we ask students, do you have any questions? That typically will get you very few students, depending on the culture of the class, that will give you a question. Instead, you can say, I would like to hear 2 questions or a comment based on what you heard, and you get more engagement. We're going to go through the 2 other scenarios that you will be analyzing for cultural shifts and the leader's role on your own, but we're going to check to make sure that we all can agree on the cultural gap that has been identified. Scenario 2, again, you can pause and read it yourself, or you can continue the video so that you can hear myself reading it for you. Whatever works best for you. Scenario 2. After the bell rings and students have left the building for the day, a small group of teachers head over to a conference room with a spread of donuts, cookies, and refreshments on one side, and a 3D printer flanked by several handout packets and a projector on the other. A vendor representative is there to talk to the teachers about the benefits of using 3D printers. And after a brief presentation and a good deal of hands-on time, the vendor representative leaves the teachers with 5 minutes left on their scheduled weekly teacher team meetings. One of the teachers passes out what appears to be a blank form with a few questions, and a quick chorus of complaints arise. Did we really just waste our entire PLC time on this when our improvement priority forms are due in 2 weeks? What was Dr. Reyes thinking, making us sit through this? Yeah, he was just saying how half of my kids can read on grade level. So how's this supposed to help with that? A couple of things, but the most prominent one is orientation and alignment. This is not something that teachers asked for. There was no buy-in. We have to be careful with multiple initiatives at one point, right? The 3D printer in relationship to learning gaps. The purpose of the meeting is to collaborate, but this meeting was a presentation. And there's a question here. We want to be curious about who was responsible for this particular meeting. So you're looking at some issues with persistence, maybe some issues with school improvement, maybe even some issues with leadership, especially in decision making. Here is scenario 3. Again, feel free to pause to read by yourself on your own if that works for you, or you can continue the video so you can hear it. Scenario 3. At an end of a year faculty meeting, a high school principal talks about the recommendations made by each of the 5 planning committees teachers have been working throughout the course of the year. She celebrates the ideas that have been surfaced and talks about the new committees for the upcoming year. To the surprise of all but few, the principal passes around a sheet that lists the committee focus areas, the members of the committee, and the leaders of each committee. You see more than a few teachers shoot glances at each other. After the meeting, you find out that not only did most teachers not know about the committees or assignments, but also that the committee leaders have been the same committee leaders over the last few years. What is the cultural gap? The most prominent gap here is openness and feedback. There's missing collaboration. Teams are handed out and teachers aren't having a voice. Professionalism, teachers' gifts, talents may not be recognized. Maybe a lack of listening and questioning or openness. Now it is your time to go and access that Google form and the next step of this experience and see your ability to recognize the structural shifts that need to happen and the leader's role, the lead learner's role in making sure that this shifts happen.